Welcome everyone to my channel Anarchy for Freedom, India's home for conspiracy research and free thinking. If you like this content, please comment on it and share it with other people so it can reach others. Please check out the links below to see how you can contribute to the effort we're undertaking by joining our group on Telegram and some other forums that I've discussed in the show notes. Today we're joined by a very dear friend Madhusudan Raj, who is an Austrian economist, and today we're going to discuss how an anarchist libertarian society would deal with the pandemic that we've just gone through, which is the COVID-19 outbreak, which wasn't really an outbreak, really, but that's a different discussion. But today we're just here to talk about how a society without a government or without a state would be able to deal with a pandemic like this. The most common response I've heard from people is that, look, we have a strong central government right now, which is why we are able to deal with it. But we strongly disagree with that. And many of the reasons Madhusudan will share with us today. So, Madhusudan, thank you so much for joining us. So where can we begin?
Thank you, Johan, for inviting me one more time again to discuss this issue. So if I have to just answer those people who are saying that it is because of the very strong central government that we are unable to kind of control this pandemic, I don't see any kind of control of the pandemic right now. Remember, when the lockdown started, there were some less than 100 cases all over India. And now after 3 months of the lockdown, we have more than 2 lakh cases in India now. India is on number 5th position right now in terms of number of cases. And I'm sure within a 1 month time, India will be number 1 also. So if at all, if this whole exercise of lockdown is an example of the complete failure of the central planning by this very strong central government. So the big problem with this pandemic is this response coming from the center. Now what happens because of this monopoly, that we are not in a position to implement our own solutions, our own plans. So we have to understand one thing, that in this pandemic itself, we have different kind of response examples, models. So for example, take South Korea. Now South Korea took a very decentralized approach. They allowed the local areas to do the testing and handle the pandemic in their own way. Instead of imposing one model from the center, they allowed the local municipalities and local suburbs, local cities to handle it in their own way. And that is the reason why the response was very systematic and it was very, very efficient. For example, one thing, if you want to learn one thing from economic science and political science and other sciences, is that a central planning will never work, because it is a common sense that who is in a better position to understand the local problem, people who are living in that locality, or somebody who is far, far away from that locality, sitting and ruling from the center. So for example, if I am in Surat city, then I know what is going on in Surat in terms of COVID-19. And I have different ideas. For example, I have better doctors to inform me that whether this virus is a very dangerous virus or it is not at all a very dangerous virus, like Sweden, for example. So Sweden did not implement any kind of lockdown. They kept their society relatively open. They allowed the schools to function. They kept their economy going. They did not shut down anything. And they have similar cases like what the other places with very heavy lockdown had. So we can see from the science itself that the virus is following its own pattern. Whether you have lockdown or whether you don't have a lockdown, it is not having any kind of significant impact on the virus spread. And as virus is spreading, it is becoming milder and milder. So virus has its own pattern which it is following. So if we look at all the data that is coming to us, one thing becomes very, very clear, is that these kind of knee-jerk approach, knee-jerk reaction that we experience in India was never needed. I mean, look at China, for example. Even China did not implement full countrywide lockdown. China, a place where the virus, the whole pandemic originated, in Wuhan, in Hubei province. So their government, their authoritarian government, their Communist Party government also only implemented lockdown in those areas where the virus was spreading. They did not lock down the whole country like India. Now India's lockdown is absolutely unprecedented, never heard of before. 135 crore people locked down in their home for 3 months time right now. And after the lockdown, the cases are more now. And now they have realized that they have no control whatsoever over the virus. So they are just randomly allowing now, throwing away the towel and giving the decision making power to the states right now. So if that is the case, if it is responsibility of the chief minister and local body municipal commissioner to decide whether to give some kind of freedom of movement during this lockdown or not, and decide when to start this school and when not to start these schools and colleges, then why they implement the lockdown from the center to begin with? If Narendra Modi is of the opinion that it is chief ministers who will decide that whether what to do with the lockdown now that 3 months have passed by, he should have kind of consulted the chief minister from the very beginning. Why in the beginning he implemented the lockdown single-handedly? Remember, he did not consult any chief ministers, he did not ask any local body, he did not take any advice of anyone, as far as I can see. That they just two three guys decided to gather to implement the lockdown, possibly because he wanted to take all the credit of defeating coronavirus by implementing the lockdown, the way he took all the credit of having an airstrike on Balakot. So I remember when he implemented the lockdown, people were saying this is surgical strike on coronavirus. But then coronavirus is not like Indian people who will listen to the wishes of prime minister. So then he realized his mistake, that things are out of his control. So now he's consulting, he's having those virtual meetings with the chief minister. So if anything, the whole exercise of lockdown in India only gives us one and one message. And that message is this, that the central planning approach of pandemic is not going to work. What is required is a decentralized approach. Because remember, the virus is not present everywhere similarly. So in India, only Mumbai, for example, is having highest number of cases, or Gujarat, for example, is having second highest number of cases. There are many states where there are no positive cases. Northeastern states, for example, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Tripura, Assam, Manipur, they did not have any positive cases. So why did they remain under the lockdown for 3 months period of time? Why did their economy were destroyed and their livelihood were destroyed? And other states, smaller states, Madhya Pradesh, they did not have that many cases. Rajasthan, I am not hearing very much. Apart from Delhi, Mumbai, Gujarat, there are not many places where virus is very prevalent. So if we have a free society, a society which is decentralized, where power is decentralized, different states are independent to take their own decisions, then the approach and the pandemic solution will be much better. Because we all face different kind of issues. Pandemic is not same everywhere. The virus has different kind of patterns, and remember, there are many different kind of strains of COVID-19 virus right now, what they call SARS-CoV-2 virus. So some 13 type of strains are there. So maybe very virulent kind of strain is present in Mumbai. Then and in Mumbai also, for example, different areas like Churchgate, or for example Malad, if they have different kind of data coming out, then they can design their own decentralized, customized policy if they have the freedom. So freedom is very important. And then don't forget this very important issue, that in the absence of government, will this kind of pandemic spread in the first place? Because for example, if China was a free society, then I'm very sure, and if all these airlines were freely operating themselves, then I'm very sure that with the first case, they will implement strict kind of rules so that the virus will not spread everywhere. Remember, China started experiencing cases in November itself, as far as I know. And Taiwan was also experiencing this animal to human transmission of the virus. They informed the WHO, which is a central body, health planning, central planning, institution in health sector. They informed them, but because China and Taiwan, they did not see eye to eye. China and Taiwan are kind of enemies, and WHO is heavily influenced by China. So they did not listen to Taiwan. When Taiwanese doctors were warning WHO that this is becoming now animal to human transmission. It is posing a danger, and you declare it as a danger to the world so people can do something about it. But they did not do it. Why? This is because WHO is also a central planning authority in health sector. No WHO, everybody will start taking precaution. In
It
India
almost
also,
seems like they wanted to justify the lockdown, so they let it spread in the beginning, and then once it actually became worse, that is when they implemented the lockdowns all over the world. It was kind of a way to justify what they were going to do, from what I understand.
but now when we are seeing the data, how can they justify? I mean, especially in India, for example, with 2 lakh cases, how can anybody justify the lockdown? I really don't understand. Unless and until you really twist the logic. For example, the government was initially giving data. Now, I remember they said that by 15th May, if they did not implement lockdown, then the cases would have been something like a million in India. Now the question is, do the Indian government have the capacity to test this many patients, that they will have this number in their hand, that a million cases will be there? Because to find out a million positive cases, they have to test at least, right, hundreds of millions of cases, and out of that maybe 3-4% will come out as positive case. So government is absolutely bluffing, they are lying, right? Because no way they have the resources to figure out that these many cases would have been there if lockdown was not there, because you need to test these people. And according to their own numbers, the Indian government is only capable of testing a couple of 100,000 cases, per month or every day, for example. So how would you come to know that this many number of cases are going to be there? ICMR doctors were saying that by 15th, May or April, there will be zero cases. We are saying that every day around 8,000, 9,000 new cases are now coming up. And now when the coronavirus cases are rising, they are loosening the lockdown. So what kind of policy is this? So I think only a very twisted logic, will, try to, will be used to justify this kind of lockdown. As I said, the lockdown only gives us one message, and one message is the central planning will never work. A government lockdown will never work, because a one size doesn't fit anyone. This is common sense. My shoe size is not right for you, and your shoe size is not right for me. So it is better that you have your own size shoe, and I have my own size shoe. So if in Surat the coronavirus cases are not rising, why should I lock down the my economy, and why should I damage the livelihood of people? I mean, look at America, for example. It's complete farce now. So they had the lockdown, and suddenly that one black guy is killed by the police, Floyd George, and now they are rioting as if there is no coronavirus. So what happened to the whole
And they're
coronavirus
justifying
narrative?
it in a way right now, saying that it's okay if you get out to protest for this because it kind of suits our political correctness, racial divide agenda. But if you come out and oppose the lockdown, you are like the worst human being who wants to kill his grandma.
See, Johan, government will justify anything. It is up to us to use our common sense and to use logic and evidence to understand whether it is justifiable or not. Because governments are never going to accept their mistakes. No government, no politician will come in front bravely and accept the defeat, will say that, okay, I made a mistake by implementing this draconian lockdown in India, and I am very sorry this many migrant workers had to face so much of trouble, there was so much of misery, so many people died, I am sorry, please forgive me. No politician will do that. It is up to the sane, logical, rational people of this country to understand what is going on and then expose these mistakes of the government, because they are definitely not going to accept their defeat. They will justify, and the people who support the statist system, they will also never accept the defeat. They are always going to support their chief ministers and their prime minister. But we have to see the objective data that is coming out and use our logic, use the science to understand whether the lockdown was successful or not. And now, even as I said, the government health officials, the committee itself is saying, I read couple of days back news report that they are advising the government that if you continue the lockdown indefinitely now, then the damage done by the lockdown will be much, much higher than what you are trying to save by stopping the coronavirus.
Personally,
And
I think
remember,
that has already happened a long time ago. But since there's so much like messed up reporting going on with the way the deaths are being reported and with the way the death certificates are being purged, there's the bias is all towards classifying people as COVID, and all the other deaths that might be happening because of a wide variety of factors, the suicides, the economic shutdowns, everything, all of that is just sidetracked. The data on that is not being kept, and all the focus is being given to corona. So wherever we
right.
see is the government, like you're saying, obviously they can justify it anyway, and if people are sheep, they'll even buy the talking point the state is presenting. So the main sort of issue we're dealing with here is, I see this as a clear cut thing. Okay, so if we don't have a state and if we have a private law society or anarcho capitalist society, then it's a clear cut thing where property owners decide, how they want to treat their property and who they want to allow in, who they don't want to allow in. The kind of gray area comes in when we are dealing with a minarchist sort of position where people think, okay, the state should be limited to defending life, liberty, and property, but then how do we respond? So maybe if you can elaborate on both those positions, because I'm sure many in the audience are not full blown anarchists, but they are somewhere where they want like a constitutionalist, limited government system. So maybe you can address both those positions.
Okay, so first let's talk about the minarchist position. Even with the government, as I said, the right approach was decentralization. Like, look at Taiwan. Now, Taiwan is not a free society. They are not a private law anarchist society. Sweden, for example, Sweden is not a society where there is no state. All these countries are with state, a nation state. But instead of taking control of everything, decision making in one person's hand or in a few person's hand, they allowed the local people to take decisions. And they also took the very right decision. They asked the scientist. Over here, I don't know who is advising the present government about the science of COVID-19.
They've
So
been ignoring
even
their own scientists actually. If you see the reports from early on, like they had compiled a study, I think in Feb, after the data had come in, and they were saying that they don't recommend a draconian lockdown. Instead, they recommend like a more contact
fine.
tracing type, isolating people who are carriers and that kind of approach. And that was totally ignored by the government. So I think it's obvious to anyone who's watching that like clearly the government is not even listening to its own epidemiologists and its own experts. So obviously they are
Right.
beholden to the World Health Organization and people like Bill Gates and other people.
So, but that's what I'm saying. That is the problem with the central planning, having just one body taking all the decisions, a couple of people taking all the decisions. It would have been much better if we had a decentralized approach. And remember, all these positive cases in India are imported cases. And it was this present government who started airlifting these people from abroad, from Wuhan, from Iran, and from Italy. That is okay, because these people are Indians and they are travelers, they are stuck abroad. Bring them back, fine, okay, in a minarchist position. But then after bringing them to India, it was government's responsibility to very efficiently isolate them, quarantine them, and only release them, from this quarantine center after they have recovered. But we saw that the quarantine facilities of government were horrible. They were very unhygienic and there were no facilities available. So people just simply ran away from this quarantine center. And then these people who came from outside, they started spreading the virus into this country. So the government's failure was very much in the beginning itself, that even after bringing this infected people to India, they failed to isolate them properly, to quarantine them properly. So that is government's failure, and that happens because there is a central planning approach. Now, if you allowed, for example, some Gujarati travelers are abroad, then Gujarat government can bring them down, and maybe Gujarat government is very efficient in isolating them. Then there will be no case in Gujarat. Then we will very efficiently isolate and quarantine people. We will provide them five-star quarantine facilities, and then nobody will try to escape. So in that case, we would have escaped. Maharashtra could have done the same thing. But all the rules and regulation are coming from the center, from Delhi. That is why the state governments were completely helpless. And as I told you, this government did not ask the chief ministers in the beginning that what to do with this situation. They single-handedly wanted to take all the credit, and that is why they implemented the lockdown. And the dramatic way in which they implemented the lockdown is also very shameful. You come at 8 o'clock in the evening and you say that 12 midnight we are going to implement full lockdown in the whole country, is absolutely kind of shameful. Because remember what happened after that. All these migrant workers, they were stuck and they did not get any chance to go back to home, and ultimately they are back home now spreading the viruses. So in the beginning only, when the virus was not present in India, if this government allowed these migrants, if they thought little bit one step ahead about consequences of their lockdown, then we would have not this many kind of cases. Now these viruses is going to spread in rural areas also, because when cities were full of virus cases, now you are running this shramik train and laborers train and sending them back to their hometown. Not in the beginning. If you just give them 1 week time, you ran all the trains, special trains, that okay, there is not much virus in India, let us send everybody back to their villages and they can be safe over there, cities will have less number of people, we can deal with them. Then the lockdown would have been a much better kind of efficient way implementing it. But they did not do that, they did not think about it.
Yeah.
They just wanted to create a drama out of that in a kind of a very dramatic way. Say 12 from the midnight it is done, like not bandi, like demonetization.
No,
But
I
this was a
understand.
serious, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So basically, our whole conversation right now is going on the basis that this is a deadly virus, and it is justified for the state in order, like, to use force in order to, like, quarantine people. So even for the status government position, as I understand, to quarantine someone, they obviously need to be infected and they need to show some kind of symptoms, because the burden of proof always rests on the person who's trying to initiate aggression. So, like, if we sit to actually think of it, as we both understand, obviously the evidence, the scientific evidence isn't present that this is a deadly virus that justifies this kind of a lockdown. And even within the status position, obviously no sound kind of legal statute would be able to justify implementing a lockdown like this, where the death rates and the case fatality rates are so bloody low, and most of the people who are contracting this virus are asymptomatic. It's just because of this thing that, okay, a positive PCR test means that you're, like, infected, and a negative one means that you're not infected. Has this whole thing been able to, like, blow out of proportion, and all these numbers and cases that we see are, like, based on really flimsy scientific ground. That's what I mean. So I don't think even within a status kind of position they would be able to justify this kind of lockdown based on the science that is available. Because obviously, we do face this problem, like, okay, when is aggression justified? And as Rothbard said, it always needs to be immediate and the threat needs to be imminent. No a case of probabilities. Oh, okay, like, if this person does this, then, so 5 steps down the line something like this might happen, or if a person drinks, then he might do this. Those kind of cases we can't justify aggression against, because you're basing it on probabilities. The threat always needs to be imminent. So if there's no imminent threat, then I don't think any kind of lockdown would be able to be justified anyway in the status kind of position. Do you agree with that?
I think we don't even have to go this deeper into the theory over here. And we don't even have to go into those very legitimate and right issues like what you were talking about, that whether the test is actually testing the coronavirus or not, and the number cooking up and everything. Even government's own statistics shows that government failed horribly in not only implementing the lockdown but also in controlling the coronavirus. Forget about all other issues. If people don't want to kind of know about it, or if they don't agree with that, that is also okay. Even with the available data coming from this government itself, it is telling us that the government failed horribly. We don't need even non-aggression principle over here, because obviously with the government there is no non-aggression principle. But even after aggressing, they did not do the right thing. I mean, for example, just for the sake of argument, if we agree that okay, you aggress upon, but then do right thing of saving the life, even from that perspective the government failed completely and horribly. So we don't need all those other arguments. Just on the basis of the given available government officials data statistics also, we can clearly see that the government failed horribly over here.
True. I don't think they stand any kind of, like, sound argument against what we are saying when it comes to this. Maybe we can talk about the ideal position that we want to see, which is the anarcho-capitalist system,
Right.
wherein most people can't even comprehend without the state. Okay, how will we build the roads? And like we are sitting and telling them that without the state we can deal with something like a deadly pandemic. So obviously this one is not a deadly pandemic, but if there were to be a hypothetical deadly pandemic in a stateless society in India, how would we deal with it?
Remember, a stateless society does not mean we will not have rules and regulation and everything. In fact, in a stateless society, the rules and regulations will be very strict, and not only strict in theory, they will be very strictly implemented. So for example, if in my area there is a coronavirus case, and if the other area just knows about it, if they lock down, if they close the door, no way I can get into there. And if I try to do something like that, then they will sue me, and I have to give them compensation in the court, which will be run privately.
But
So
they would
those
sue you
private.
without the virus as well, right? Because it is a private property and you would be a trespasser, even without the virus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Even without the virus. What I'm saying is, with the virus, it is also going to be the case. And without the
Yeah.
virus, of course, it is going to be the case. But because we are talking about coronavirus, this so called pandemic, so that is why I'm discussing that if with virus you enter those areas, then you will have to, face the legal system. They will not, in fact, allow you. The police, a private police manning those societies, let's say those gated societies, will never allow you inside there. So that is one thing. Again, medical response will also be very, very decentralized and very, very customized. Now, we really don't know what kind of science will be available. Maybe, if like what we are talking about, there are many doctors who really understand that this pandemic is not really very dangerous. And even if it is dangerous, different kind of medical system will be available into different kind of privately run areas. So somebody will find out some kind of solution very quickly compared to other one, and then that solution will be shared with everybody. And as I said, the virus will have very little chance of spreading because private property owner will stop everything. And not only that, all these private airline companies and other transportation systems, they will be also extra careful. The moment they will come to know that this kind of virus is spreading into some area. So remember, the virus started spreading in November in Wuhan, and they stopped these international traffic somewhere in March. So what were they doing for this many months? If it was the case that only through international travel the virus is entering into different countries, then they should have locked down these different countries and stopped the international travel long ago. Private airline companies will do that because they don't want to lose their customer base, because if somebody will come to know that it was this airline who was responsible for bringing virus into our city, then that company will lose business. So they will have very strict checking of their patient, their travelers, their passengers. And if they will find out that somebody is infected, then they will isolate them very quickly. These kind of things will be inbuilt into the contracts itself, right? Initially when you are buying the ticket, this will be part of the contract, that if something like this will happen, the airline companies can do that.
Exactly. This is how
So
the market would be so brutal against someone who doesn't like represent popular opinion, because whoever's right, like whether the airlines are stopping it and losing out on some business gets more support, or whether an airline that basically like thinks like us and think this whole thing is a scam and they just let the passengers travel anyway. Like people would
right,
decide based on like what they agree with, and the market would put its weight on either side. That's how we would come out with winners, and that's why it's much more efficient and better, because everyone has the individual freedom to make these choices, and that's how the society will manifest.
right, exactly.
Yeah. So if I can add some more points to what you're saying, some ideas around how places that would want to reopen, want to start, like say I own a private society, uh, and I control the rule making because the people over there have decided to form this kind of structure where I have an important role in that. And we have locked things down because we're scared of the virus now, but we want to start opening up. So there can be many solutions, like people who are coming in, like if that society believes in vaccines, they can want people to be vaccinated so that they can be let in, or there can be some kind of antibody testing to see that if they've already contracted it and dealt with it, then they can be let in. So these kind of solutions will always be there. And I mean, like, obviously a lot of this would depend on the science as well, but it just depends, like, everyone will have the freedom to choose. So for example, let's say I own a business and people want to come and do business with me, and I'm okay with the risk of, like, say, me catching the virus, and someone else is okay and they still want to voluntarily trade with us, we would still be able to go ahead and absolutely do that, and no one would be able to stop it. As, like, we both accept the risk, as, like, life comes with risk. Like right now we're just focused on the coronavirus risk, but the risk is always there in life from, like, getting 100 different things. So we accept the risk and we want to deal with it. Right now people can't do that with their own properties, with their own businesses, because there's a central response, like you're saying, and that is always bad and immoral, because they've stopped voluntary people who don't even mind, say, contracting the virus and, like, dealing with the infection on their own, and, like, actually making their own choice that way. The government has stopped them forcefully from doing that. And another main problem the government has caused right now is its centralized medical response, because a lot of the people who are falling sick, like, they have to go through the government's way and they have to get
Right.
the treatment that's prescribed by the ICMR. And we're seeing, like, treatments like intravenous nutraceutical therapies and, like, other things which are showing effectiveness, like, in different places in the world, but just because they're not approved by the regulatory agencies or the government, that's why people can't use it. So the other kind of real problems we're facing, wherein, like, I've read a lot of data that the current drugs that are being used, like remdesivir and, like, other antiviral strong drugs, they can be deadly for people who already have comorbidities. So a lot of the people,
Right.
like, who are dying right now, like the ventilators and the harsh drugs that are being used, are playing a big role in killing them anyway. So if the medical response is also decentralized and people had the choice to decide, like, okay, I want this, so I want that, they would be able to do that. But it's right now, like, we're,
Yeah.
we're denied individual liberty, we're denied the right to make our own health choices, and this is why we're
Yeah.
seeing the blunder that we're seeing today.
Yeah. Medical science itself is monopolized. So as if only allopathy is the cure of everything. For example, there are, and they call other curative system as alternative medical system. They are not alternative. They are present even before allopathy was invented, kind of it came, on the picture. So for example, there is Indian Ayurveda or naturopathy, right? Uh, Chinese, medicine, acupuncture, chiropractors are there. There are all these people. I mean, regarding this virus, these two things, that it is virus that is responsible, but nobody is asking the question that it is the terrain, the immunity, that is actually responsible. So naturopathic doctors, for example, the NDs, they will tell us that it is because our natural immune system that is weak. That is the reason why people are dying. Viruses are always going to be there. Viruses are there with us since the beginning of life itself. In fact, many of these viruses are made out of our cells, our body cells. So to think that these germs are killing us is itself a problem. The whole medical science, the allopathic doctors, the MDs, they have completely monopolized the system since the beginning of the 20th century, and they have created all these monopoly institutions like CDC or FDA in America, that only drug can cure you, which is absolutely ridiculous. For example, if I am taking some kind of food supplements, I am taking vitamins or minerals, then if that is curing me, then they will not allow me to say that this is the cure. They will say that this is supplement. Only drug can cure, and only big pharmaceutical companies can manufacture drug. So this is
Basically
all
treating
about,
people like kids, right? Like kids who can't, like,
and
actually read claims and make up their own mind about things. Like the state has
and
to
they,
come in and tell people that, oh, only if we say that this can cure, then can it actually cure, and anyone else who says otherwise is putting the public's life at danger. And this is the same argument that's made with, like, trying to regulate who, like, if children or, like, other kind of people can put money in certain instruments. And, like, this is based on the same kind of mindset that people cannot make their own decisions, and that's why the state needs to come in and protect people for their own good, even when someone would want to do something voluntary. That whole argument is flimsy.
but then Johan, they don't even want to cure us.
Yeah.
Medical, the allopathic medical science, this whole MD doctor is not about curing anything. It's about managing the disease. They will only manage the symptom. In 100 years of their existence, they are not in a position to find any kind of cure for a simple thing like flu or common cold, right? Cancer research has, they have spent billions and trillions of dollars, but even after billions and trillions of spending, what did they find? No cure. They only manage the disease, and ultimately they kill you. right? They just hasten your death instead of completely curing. Means what? You remove the cause of the disease out of your body. So that requires, different kind of approaches. For example, naturopathy, right? You eat right kind of food. If you get those essential nutrients, then your body is going to function. Body wants to heal itself,
Yeah, in
right?
my opinion, studying nutrition science as well, like the only reason why people fall sick is you're giving your body what it doesn't need and you're not giving your body what it needs. I mean, it sounds too simplistic, but basically, like all the technical biochemistry and everything that goes on within your body and you falling sick is because of these two reasons. So if you just eliminate the toxicity and like make sure what is not needed by the body, and this can come in many
Right,
different forms, like processed vegetable oils or like inflammatory fats and heavy
right,
metal toxicity, PCBs. Like there's so many things your body doesn't need that we're being poisoned with today because of the kind of like bad status legal system and property sort of norms that we have today. And on the other hand, like we're not giving our body what it needs because the food and like so many different things, man. Like there's so many different aspects that play a role in people's health, their emotional aspects, spiritual. Like there's so much
yeah,
that actually
yeah,
controls the epigenetic environment, which makes certain
right,
genes manifest, which can actually like lower down
right,
the road result in disease. So what the discussion we're having here is highly philosophical. I mean, like this is a debate that has gone on for very long, like whether it's
I
actually bacteria and viruses that are causative or are they just exposing a weakened terrain that already exists and they're kind of giving a message to your body and your body is not able to handle that, so it's kind of manifesting symptoms that way. So
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So in a decentralized free society, this kind of health monopolies will also not be there. So if I want to go with naturopathy, I want to consult a naturopathy doctor, then I'll go there. Somebody believes in Ayurveda, I'll go there. What is important is a patient getting cured. Doesn't matter how he's getting cured. Okay, if I pray to God and if it it feels good, then fine. Okay, you call it whatever you want to call it, but remember all these things are placebos, and placebos are nothing less than medicine. So the
We're
moment
just calling it placebo. I mean, the mind is very powerful. We're just giving it a name. Like, okay, if people believe this, it happens. Like, how does it
yeah,
happen? Like, most mainstream scientists aren't even able to explain
right,
how placebo actually like. I mean that they
right,
actually it's showing us the mind body connection that like your beliefs do play a big
right,
role in how disease
right,
manifests, and this is the biggest
right,
problem when we have a state, because the state always
right,
has this unholy alliance with an
right,
industry like the pharmaceutical industry, and then we have these things forced down on us instead of us making our
right.
decentralized choices. So all of these things will be available to us in a stateless society. Whereas right now, like we discuss 100 issues that we are facing just because the state has a monopoly on so many different things.
Exactly. Very true.
Yeah. So I think that's a good discussion that we had, and I hope the viewers benefited a lot from the ideas that we exchanged today. If you can just tell viewers where they can find you and where they can explore your work further, that'd be great.
I have my own institute, Johan Mises Institute India, Mises India Institute. So they can visit the website misesindia.in. All my articles and all my interviews are there. I have my own YouTube channel. You can put a link below the video in your channel for that. And we run different kind of workshops here in this institute. So if your viewer want to understand what sound economics is or what libertarianism is and how a libertarian free society will function, and not only handle pandemic, but it will also build roads, and it will also it will also handle the crime. It will also deliver justice. It would also remove all these lessen at least the economic problems like unemployment or poverty or inflation or inequality. You just name any kind of human problem, and free society, anarcho-capitalist society is in a position, a libertarian society is in a position to provide better, efficient, and more importantly moral solutions of all these issues. So if they want to understand all these things, then they can come and attend my workshop, and they can read my articles on my institute's website misesindia.in.
Definitely. Government is slavery and taxation is theft. If you want to do your bit and you want to help us in the work we're doing, please be sure to comment on this video and share it so it can reach more people and more people open up to these ideas. And I'll take your leave there. Thank you so much, Madhusudan, for coming on. Good night.
Thank you for inviting me, Johan. Good night.